The morning hadn't even properly begun when Officer Daniel Reyes realized something was off. The sun was barely peeking over the horizon, the kind of weak light that made the world look cold and washed out. Daniel sat in his cruiser outside the Riverside County substation, swirling the last gulp of bitter coffee in his paper cup, trying to shake the restless feeling he'd had since waking up. His canine partner, Shadow, a black German shepherd with the instincts of a detective and the attitude of a soldier, was unusually alert, pacing in the back seat like he was waiting for something. Then the radio crackled. It wasn't the usual chatter, no traffic stops, no routine calls, not even the early morning noise from dispatch. Instead, the voice of a new dispatcher, still stiff with training, came through with a tremor Daniel didn't miss. Unit Bravo 12, we've got a silent alarm activation near the old mill freight yard. No motion sensors triggered, no secondary alerts, just the panic button. Daniel blinked. The service shack, he asked, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Yes, sir, that's the location. That place was shut down 3 years ago. Yes, sir. That's why it's odd. Odd was an understatement. Nobody worked there anymore. Not maintenance crews, not inspectors, not even trespassers, not after the county sealed the access roads and welded the doors shut. The place was a ghost yard of rusting freight cars and half-collapsed structures that the city promised every year to demolish, but never did. A silent alarm didn't just trigger itself. Daniel tossed the coffee aside. Bravo 12 en route. Shadow immediately stopped pacing and stared out the window, posture rigid. Daniel caught the look and frowned. You feel it too, boy. Shadow didn't blink. The drive was short, but with every mile, the uneasy feeling in Daniel's chest grew heavier. Fog clung to the edges of the asphalt like it didn't want to let the world wake up yet. The freight yard loomed ahead, acres of old tracks that curved like black veins through overgrown weeds. A cold wind swept across the land, carrying the metallic scent of rust and something else Daniel couldn't name. He parked near the service shack, the one place where a panic button shouldn't have been touched. Shadow let out a low whine. The shack was exactly as the county had left it, padlocked, boarded, covered in dust thick enough to write in. No footprints, no forced entry, no broken windows, nothing. Daniel circled it twice, checking every inch. Nothing made sense. He was about to radio dispatch for an update when Shadow suddenly yanked hard on his leash, nearly ripping it out of Daniel's hand. Shadow, easy. But Shadow wasn't listening. The dog's ears were pinned back, his muscles tight, nose pointed dead ahead, toward the train tracks behind the yard. He barked once, sharp and urgent. Daniel's instincts kicked in. Shadow only acted like this when he smelled fear or danger. All right, Daniel muttered, unclipping the leash. Show me. Shadow took off like a bullet. Daniel sprinted behind him, boots kicking up gravel. The wind sharpened, slicing through the bare trees. In the distance, an old crossing gate creaked with the gusts, the sound eerie enough to raise goosebumps on Daniel's arms. Shadow skidded to a stop at the main track line and began barking wildly. Daniel slowed, chest heaving, scanning the rails. At first, he saw nothing, just endless steel stretching in the fog. Then he saw her, a tiny body lying across the rails. Daniel's blood turned to ice. He bolted forward so fast, he barely felt his legs move. As he got closer, the tail sharpened into a nightmare. A girl, maybe 8 years old, wrists bound with rope, hair tangled with dirt. Her clothes were torn at the sleeves like she'd been dragged. Her small chest moved in faint, shallow breaths. She was alive. Barely. Hey, hey, sweetheart, Daniel whispered, kneeling beside her. You're safe now. I've got you. Her eyelids fluttered. She looked at him with eyes full of exhaustion and terror so deep it seemed older than she was. Her lips trembled. T-Train. The word was barely a whisper, but Daniel heard it, and before he could react, a distant horn echoed across the valley. A freight train, moving fast. Daniel scooped her into his arms and ran, Shadow sprinting beside him. Gravel slipped beneath his boots, his heart slamming against his ribs as the horn grew louder. Closer, unstoppable. He leapt off the rails just as the train thundered past, whipping the air into a violent roar. The girl clung to his uniform, shaking uncontrollably. Daniel tried to calm her, but before he could speak, she whispered something else, something that made his skin crawl. He said he'd come back. Daniel pressed his back against the cold steel side of the train, trying to steady his breathing. The girl clung to him, small arms wrapped around his neck like she might float away if he let go. Her chest rose and fell in shallow gasps, eyes wide and unblinking. A mix of terror and exhaustion that made Daniel's gut twist. Shadow's low growl vibrated through the air, hackles raised, ears pricked toward the tree line beyond the tracks. The dog had an instinct for danger, and right now, danger was looming closer than Daniel wanted to admit. The girl's voice was a fragile whisper, almost swallowed by the wind. He's coming back. Daniel's stomach sank. The phrasing wasn't random. Someone had intentionally left her here, on the tracks, vulnerable to the train, and now she was signaling that he wasn't done. Daniel glanced toward the fog-draped trees. Every instinct in him screamed that someone was watching. "Hey, it's okay. I'm here. You're safe, all right?" Daniel murmured, trying to keep his own voice steady for her sake. But as he spoke, he noticed subtle signs. Footprints in the damp dirt leading from the tree line toward the tracks. They were fresh, large, deliberate, and somehow menacing. Whoever had done this wanted the girl found, or wanted someone to follow. Shadow sniffed at the air, his growl deepening. Daniel followed the dog's gaze and saw movement, a flicker of black darting behind a tree. Just a shadow, but enough to make Daniel reach for his holster. The adrenaline coursing through him was almost painful. He had a job to do. Save the girl. Catch whoever did this. Stay alive. The girl's small voice broke through his concentration. Don't let him see you." She clutched his uniform tighter. "He says, if anyone finds me first, bad things happen." Daniel's chest tightened. He didn't like the sound of bad things. It sounded deliberate, personal. Whoever had left her here wasn't just dangerous. They were intelligent, calculating. He lifted her gently, cradling her against his chest. Shadow followed, stepping cautiously beside him. The wind carried the faint echo of metal scraping, not from the train anymore, but something closer. Daniel scanned the shadows. "Stay with me," he whispered to the girl, pressing her back to his chest. "You're not alone now." But even as he said it, he couldn't shake the feeling they were being watched from somewhere deep in the trees. Every rustle of leaves, every snapping twig, made him flinch. Daniel knew he had to move. He jogged toward his patrol SUV parked near the freight yard entrance, keeping low, scanning constantly. The girl whispered again, barely audible. He said, "He watches all the time." Her words cut like knives. Daniel's blood ran cold. This wasn't random. This was personal. Whoever this was, they had planned this encounter meticulously. The girl's small hand trembled against his chest. Daniel tried to calm her, talking in low, steady tones. "We're getting out of here. You're safe now. I'm not going anywhere." But the moment felt fragile, like a glass figurine in the hands of fate. Shadow barked suddenly, a sharp, urgent warning. Daniel froze. Something moved near the edge of the lot, fast, deliberate, not humanly graceful, almost predatory. Daniel's heart slammed. He reached the SUV and yanked open the door, sliding inside with the girl. Shadow jumped into the back, eyes fixed on the tree line. Daniel locked the doors, trying to force himself to think. Who would leave a child on the tracks? And why here, in a place nobody visited? There were no witnesses, no cameras, no signs of forced entry, except for the footprints and the faint sound of movement. Someone was smart, someone methodical, someone dangerous. The girl burrowed against him, whispering again. He said, "Only the dog could find me first." She shivered. Daniel's pulse spiked. He knew what that meant. She had been hidden, tracked, left as bait for someone who could move through shadows, someone who wanted to test him. Then a snap echoed from the tree line, sharp, deliberate. Daniel's hand went to his holster. Shadow barked again, hackles bristling. The girl's eyes widened in terror. Daniel realized something horrifying. The person who had left her here wasn't gone. They were still close, watching, waiting. Every instinct screamed at him to act. But how do you confront someone who knows you're coming, who has engineered every detail? The girl whispered one final thing before falling silent. He's not done. Daniel's blood ran cold. He understood in that instant. This was far from over. Whoever had put her on the tracks had left a trap, and they were about to spring it. Shadow growled low, every hair on his back raised, eyes locked on the shadows beyond the SUV. Daniel gripped the wheel, his knuckles white. The world outside felt like a nightmare in motion, and he knew this was only the beginning. Because somewhere out there, in the fog and the trees, someone was waiting, watching them, planning their next move. Daniel gripped the steering wheel like it was a lifeline. The girl's arms tightened around his neck, small fingers digging into the fabric of his uniform as if it could shield her from the world. Outside, Shadow growled low, pacing the back of the SUV, ears pinned forward, eyes fixed on the fog-shrouded tree line. Every instinct Daniel had screamed the same thing. They were not alone. Whoever had put this girl on the tracks, whoever had left the silent alarm, the footprints, the carefully orchestrated chance for her to be discovered, was still nearby, watching, waiting. The girl's voice broke the tense silence, barely audible over the wind whipping through the abandoned yard. He said, "He'd come back," she whispered, eyes wide and frightened. Daniel's throat went dry. "Who said that?" he asked gently, trying to keep his voice calm, to anchor her in the present. She shook her head slowly, hair sticking to her damp cheeks. "He, the man, the one who put me there. He said he'd come back. He said only the dog could find me first." Daniel's heart pounded. Only the dog could find her first? That wasn't a child's misunderstanding. That was a warning. The girl had been set as bait. The plan wasn't random. It was methodical, calculated, cruel. Whoever this man was, he had anticipated Shadow's instincts and Daniel's response. Daniel glanced at Shadow, who was tense and growling low, hackles raised. The dog's nose twitched, sniffing the night air. The faint smell of damp earth and something else, coppery, metallic, reached Daniel's senses. Blood. Not yet. Something worse. The scent of control. The man wanted them to follow him, and Daniel knew instinctively that it would only lead to more danger. But he couldn't leave the girl. He couldn't risk her alone in the dark, exposed, waiting for someone who clearly had no regard for human life. "Stay low," Daniel murmured, gripping the girl tighter. "We're going to get you somewhere safe." The SUV rattled as he started the engine. Headlights cut through the mist, painting the yard in harsh, sharp lines. Shadow sat alert in the back, growling as a faint noise echoed from the tree line. A crack, deliberate, measured, like a branch stepping under weight. Daniel's blood ran cold. Someone was moving closer. The girl whimpered and pressed her face into his chest. He's watching," she said, barely a whisper. Daniel forced himself to look past the foggy windshield, scanning the tree line for any movement. At first, he saw nothing. Then, a shadow shifted, a dark figure slipping between trees like a predator, deliberate and silent. Daniel's hand went to his holster. Every fiber of his body tensed, ready to react. The girl shivered. He said, "If anyone touches me, if anyone interferes, bad things happen." Daniel's jaw tightened. This wasn't just a kidnap. This was a game, and he was inside it, along with the girl and his dog. Whoever this man was, he had played with fear before, and he knew how to manipulate it. Daniel considered calling for backup, but the foggy yard blocked signals, and the last few attempts had produced only static. Reinforcements were miles away, and every second counted. The train tracks, the abandoned cars, the crumbling shack. Every inch of the yard could hide the man. Then, suddenly, a movement at the far edge of the lot drew Daniel's gaze. A figure darted behind a rusted freight car, impossibly fast, with a precision that made Daniel's stomach knot. Shadow barked, lunging toward the motion, but Daniel grabbed the leash, yanking the dog back. "He's fast." "To fast," Daniel muttered. The girl's small hand trembled in his, her voice a whisper in the tense night. He said, "The dog would find me." He said, "You'd come." Daniel's pulse raced. It was all too clear now. The man had planned this. Every step, every scare, every detail. He had anticipated Daniel's instincts, Shadow's tracking, the girl's fear, and now he was testing them, pushing them toward some unknown endgame. Daniel glanced at Shadow. The dog's ears twitched, nose low, eyes locked on the tree line. Daniel knew Shadow could sense something beyond human perception, something in the air, in the dirt, in the fog. "All right, boy," Daniel whispered, his voice low and tense. "Lead the way, but stay ready." The girl clung tighter to him, fear radiating off her in waves. Daniel didn't speak. Words wouldn't protect her. Only action could. And then, from the tree line, a twig snapped. Not random, not accidental. The man was moving. Closer. Daniel's fingers tightened on the steering wheel. Shadow growled, low and menacing. The girl's wide eyes met his, pleading. And for a heartbeat, time seemed to freeze. Because in that instant, Daniel realized they were trapped in a game far bigger than a simple rescue. and the man who had left her on the tracks had no intention of letting them leave. Without a reckoning, somewhere in the fog, someone was waiting, watching, planning, and Daniel Reyes had no idea what would happen next. Daniel parked the SUV behind a rusted shipping container at the edge of the freight yard. Shadow jumped down, moving ahead cautiously, nose close to the ground, muscles coiled like a spring. The girl's small body trembled against him, but she didn't speak. Her silence was heavier than words. It pressed against Daniel's ears like a warning. Somewhere in the mist, the man who had left her on the tracks was still watching, still calculating, and Daniel knew that every second spent here could tip the balance. The footprints in the damp dirt were the first clue. Heavy, deliberate, deep impressions that cut into the mud like a signature. They led from the edge of the trees toward the tracks where Daniel had found the girl. But then, they stopped. The mud ended abruptly, leaving no trace. No tire marks, no continued steps, just an empty, haunting space where the predator had vanished. Daniel squatted beside the prints, running the gloved hand along the edge, feeling the soil, the moisture, the intention behind them. He walks. Quiet now, the girl whispered from behind him. Daniel froze. What do you mean? He asked. He said. Silence is the weapon, she murmured. Her small fingers dug into his jacket. He said, if you make noise, it's trouble. Daniel's jaw tightened. He understood immediately. This wasn't just a game of hide and seek. Whoever this man was, he was trained, patient, and meticulous. Every move had been calculated to lure them in. Shadow's low growl deepened, ears flicking, tail rigid. The dog sensed more than Daniel could see, an invisible presence that pressed down on the yard. Like a weight, Daniel looked up. The fog made shapes in the trees seem alive, branches twisting like claws. Something moved. He wasn't imagining it. Shadow lunged forward, barking, hackles raised, nose pointing toward a thick stand of oaks. Daniel followed cautiously, holding the girl tight against his chest. The girl's voice trembled. He said, if anyone comes close, he'll know. Daniel's pulse thudded painfully in his chest. He had to make a choice. Stay in the open, risk being trapped, or follow the trail, unknown, into the woods. He knew instinctively that the latter was the only option. Shadow led the way, silent paws pressing into leaves and mud. Daniel followed, boots crunching softly, senses alert. The footprints led deeper into the woods, twisting and weaving as if designed to confuse anyone tracking them. Daniel scanned constantly. Every shadow seemed like a threat. Every rustle of leaves could be a predator ready to strike. The girl clutched his arm, her small body shaking with cold and fear. Suddenly, Shadow froze, ears pricked, hackles high. Daniel stopped, heart pounding. Ahead, among the gnarled roots of an old oak, he saw a flash of black, movement deliberate to be a deer or a raccoon. The man was here, watching, waiting. The girl whispered. He said, he likes to see who comes. Daniel's throat went dry. He realized the full horror. This wasn't just about leaving a girl on the tracks. This was about testing him, testing his reactions, his instincts, his patience. The man had orchestrated everything to see if Daniel would follow, and now, somewhere in the darkness, he was observing, ready to strike if a mistake was made. A twig snapped. Daniel spun toward the sound. Shadow barked furiously, lunging toward the noise, but Daniel grabbed the leash. He couldn't risk a full chase. Not yet. He needed control, strategy. The girl's small voice trembled. He left. Something else. What is it? Daniel asked, leaning down slightly. She shook her head. He said, you know what it means when you see it. Daniel's pulse spiked. That cryptic message, combined with the footprints and the vanished trail, left a single undeniable truth. The man wasn't done. Not by a long shot. He was playing a game Daniel didn't understand yet, but every sign pointed to danger, immediate, personal, unavoidable. Shadow growled again, low and throaty. Daniel glanced up and caught the edge of movement in the mist, the shadow of a figure slipping behind the trees, watching, calculating, vanishing almost before the eye could register it. Daniel pressed his lips together, forcing himself to stay calm. He had to protect the girl, decipher the clues, and anticipate the man's next move. Every instinct screamed that waiting, hesitating, or panicking would be catastrophic. The girl clutched his sleeve. He's close. Too close. Daniel's eyes darted through the fog, trying to pierce the darkness that seemed to twist the woods into a maze. Shadow growled, sniffed the air, and then froze. nose pointing to a barely noticeable trail leading away from the footprints. A second, subtler path. Daniel's heart skipped. He realized this trail was the next clue, the man's trap, the path he wanted them to take. He tightened his grip on the girl. "Stay behind me," he whispered, "and whatever happens, don't make a sound." Because somewhere, in the shadowy woods, the man was moving, watching, waiting, and Daniel knew, with a certainty that made his blood run cold, the next step could change everything. Daniel's pulse slammed in his chest as he followed the subtle trail Shadow had detected, each step crunching softly on leaves soaked with morning dew. The girl pressed against him, her small hands gripping his arm so tightly he could feel the fear radiating through her. Every instinct screamed at him that the man, the one who had left her on the tracks, was still here, watching, calculating, enjoying the terror he had orchestrated. Shadow moved ahead cautiously, nose low, ears pricked. The dog's growl vibrated deep in his chest, warning Daniel that the threat was closer than he dared imagine. Then he saw it, a flicker of black movement high in an oak branch, perfectly still, yet alive. A shadow among the leaves. Daniel froze, his breath caught in his throat. "Up there," he whispered to himself, heart hammering. The figure shifted just slightly, enough to reveal a hint of a face obscured by dark cloth. Then, with unnerving grace, the man dropped from the tree, landing silently on the leaf-strewn forest floor. Daniel's eyes widened. Every motion of this man was deliberate, controlled, and terrifyingly fast. He wasn't clumsy or desperate. He was patient, a predator. The girl whimpered, pressing her face against Daniel's chest. "Who is he?" she whispered. Daniel didn't answer. He didn't need to. He had seen enough. He recognized the kind of menace that didn't need words. Shadow snarled and stepped forward, but Daniel held the leash tightly. He couldn't let the dog rush him blindly. The man's gaze locked onto Daniel and the girl, dark eyes gleaming with a quiet, calculated madness. He moved slowly, deliberately, staying partially hidden behind the trunks of the towering oaks. His movements were almost invisible, blending with the fog and the twisted branches. He's watching us," the girl breathed, shivering. Daniel nodded slightly, keeping his eyes trained on the man's movements. "I see him," he murmured. "We stay calm. We stay close." The man stopped behind a tree a few meters away, appearing and disappearing with the shadows. Then he spoke, a calm, measured voice that made Daniel's skin crawl. "You took longer than I expected," the man said. "I thought the dog would have done all the work already." Daniel's pulse spiked. He recognized the voice instantly. Cole Mercer. Years ago, Daniel had arrested this survivalist, a violent, intelligent loner who had vanished after his release, slipping into the mountains like a ghost. Mercer had sworn revenge, and now Daniel understood why. This was no random encounter. It was personal. The girl trembled, muttering, "He said the dog would find me first. He said you'd come." Mercer's lips curved into a slow, sinister grin. He took a deliberate step forward, into a faint circle of pale sunlight breaking through the fog. Daniel tensed, hand on his holster, every muscle coiled. Shadow growled low, hackles raised, ready to strike. "You followed the trail," Mercer said. "I wondered if you would. I wondered if you had the patience." Daniel swallowed hard, keeping the girl pressed close. "Let her go," he said, voice firm. "This ends now." Mercer laughed softly, almost musical, but with a dark edge. "Oh no, officer. This is just the beginning." She was bait. "You followed. You came exactly where I wanted. Now we see how clever you really are." Shadow barked, lunging forward. Mercer dodged with unnerving precision, disappearing behind another tree. Daniel's heart pounded. He knew that one misstep could be catastrophic. The girl's small hands clung to him desperately, and he realized the full weight of the responsibility he carried. Then, almost too quickly to comprehend, Mercer was gone, vanished into the trees like a shadow dissolving in the fog. Daniel spun, searching, trying to anticipate his next move, but Mercer had left a single clue behind, a torn piece of black cloth caught on a tree branch, fluttering like a warning. On it, a marker scrawled in bold letters spelled one word, Reyes. The girl gasped, eyes wide. He knows your name." Daniel's jaw tightened. He had expected threats, traps, terror, but this was personal. Mercer had engineered everything to test him, to see if he would react, to manipulate him. The stakes were no longer just about saving the girl. Now they were about surviving the mind of a man who thrived on fear and control. Daniel scanned the foggy woods, muscles tense, every sense on high alert. Shadow growled, nose low to the ground, tail rigid. The girl trembled against him, small and fragile, yet clinging to hope. And Daniel knew one terrifying truth. Mercer wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Somewhere in the shadows, Mercer was watching, waiting for the next move. And when he struck again, Daniel realized there might be no room for mistakes. Daniel's chest heaved as he pressed the girl closer against him, eyes scanning the misty forest. The torn piece of black cloth with his name scrawled across it flapped weakly in the breeze. A sinister calling card, a personal message from Colt Mercer. Years ago, Daniel had arrested Mercer, putting the violent survivalist behind bars for an assault that nearly ended a small-town standoff. But Mercer had vanished after his release, disappearing into the mountains, leaving Daniel with a gnawing sense of unfinished business. And now, as the fog clung to the tree line like a shroud, that unfinished business had found them. The girl clutched his uniform tightly. He said, "He left something else," she whispered. Her voice trembled. "Something you know what it means." Daniel swallowed hard. He had spent years thinking Mercer had simply disappeared, a ghost in the wilds. But the handwriting on the mask, the strategic placement of the girl on the tracks, and now this personal taunt made it painfully clear Mercer had been planning this moment, orchestrating it meticulously, tracking Daniel's every move. Shadow growled low, scanning the forest. The dog's body was coiled like a spring, alert to every subtle noise, every flicker of movement. Daniel knew that Shadow was picking up what his human senses couldn't. The faint scent of Mercer, lingering in the damp earth, invisible but unmistakable. Daniel's mind raced. He couldn't call for backup. Radio signals were weak, unreliable in this isolated freight yard and forest. Every choice he made now would have consequences. Every misstep could mean the difference between life and death. He glanced down at the girl, whose eyes were wide with fear, and felt a surge of determination. Whoever Mercer was, he had underestimated Daniel's instincts and Shadow's abilities. The girl's small hand trembled in his. He left a mark, she whispered. She tugged at his sleeve, pointing to the base of an old oak tree. Daniel bent down and saw it, a symbol etched into the dirt. Faint but deliberate, a circle with an X slashed through it. Daniel froze. The symbol was unmistakable. He had seen it years ago in Mercer's old threat letters, carved into courtroom benches, painted on walls in the abandoned warehouse where Mercer had once threatened Daniel's career and safety. It wasn't just a mark. It was a message, unfinished business, a challenge, a warning. Daniel's pulse quickened. Mercer hadn't left the girl randomly. He had positioned her as bait, created a trail, and now left the symbol to taunt Daniel, to test his resolve. He had orchestrated every move, every clue, every breath of fear. The girl's small voice cut through the tension. He said, "The dog would find me first." He said, "You know what it means." Daniel's jaw tightened. He understood now. This was more than a chase. Mercer wanted to play a game, a deadly test of skill, patience, and instinct. The stakes weren't just the girl's life anymore. They were personal. Mercer had engineered this encounter to see if Daniel would rise to the challenge, to see if he would protect the girl, to see if he had the courage and intelligence to survive. Shadow barked suddenly, low and urgent. Daniel looked up just in time to see movement among the trees, a flash of black disappearing behind a thick trunk. Mercer was near, circling, observing, calculating. Daniel's heart pounded. He knew Mercer would not make a careless mistake. Every action, every word, every pause was intentional. Daniel took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. He adjusted the girl in his arms, whispering, "We're going to get through this. Stay with me. Shadow will protect us." The dog growled again, stepping slightly in front of them, muscles coiled. Daniel followed the faint trail, moving deliberately toward the next clue Mercer had left behind. Every snap of a branch, every rustle of leaves heightened the tension, the anticipation, the dread. Then, almost imperceptibly, something shifted in the fog, a subtle shadow among the trees, a whisper of movement that made Daniel freeze. Mercer was close, too close, and he was enjoying the fear he had planted like seeds in Daniel's mind. The girl pressed her face into Daniel's chest, trembling. "He's close, too close," she whispered. Daniel's fingers tightened on the strap holding her. Shadow's hackles bristled, and Daniel realized, with grim clarity, that this was no longer just a rescue. This was a confrontation, a battle of wits, patience, and nerves. Mercer was here, somewhere in the shadows, watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And Daniel knew one terrifying truth. If he hesitated, if he miscalculated, if he faltered, the girl, Shadow, and he himself could all pay the ultimate price. Somewhere in the forest, Mercer's presence pressed on them, silent, calculated, inevitable. Daniel tightened his jaw and whispered, almost to himself, "We're not letting him win. Not now, not ever." Daniel's boots sank slightly into the damp forest floor as he followed the faint trail Shadow had picked up. The girl clung to him like a lifeline, trembling, whispering reassurances she could barely believe herself. Each rustle of the leaves, each snap of a twig, made Daniel's instincts scream. Somewhere in the shadows, cold Mercer was watching, a predator savoring the slow terror he had engineered. Daniel knew it wasn't just about the girl anymore. It was about him. A test, a trap, and Mercer had designed every detail to see if Daniel could survive it. Shadow halted abruptly beside a gnarled old oak. The dog's nose twitched, muscles coiled. Daniel bent down to see what had caught his partner's attention. Etched into the dirt at the tree's base was a symbol, a circle with an X slashed through it. Daniel's heart skipped. He had seen it before, years ago, in Mercer's old threat letters. It was a signature, a warning, a challenge. The girl's small voice quivered. He said, "You know what it means." Daniel's jaw tightened. He did know. Mercer had carved the symbol into courtroom benches during his sentencing, a mark of obsession, of unfinished business. It was never just graffiti. It was a message. "This is personal, and I am watching." Shadow growled, low and deep, as movement flickered through the trees. Daniel's eyes darted to the source, muscles tensing. The fog shifted, and a shape materialized briefly, a black silhouette, vanishing again before Daniel could focus. Mercer was close, too close. The man had planned every detail, every step, every trap. This was more than a chase. It was psychological warfare, and Daniel knew he was being tested. The girl's small hands dug into his jacket. He's here," she whispered, panic rising in her voice. Daniel scanned the tree line, looking for any hint of movement. His heart hammered in his chest. Every instinct screamed that Mercer was circling them, observing, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Daniel didn't flinch. He tightened his grip on the girl and whispered, "Stay calm. Shadow will protect us." The dog's ears flicked, nose low, tail rigid. Every muscle in Shadow's body was poised for action. Daniel followed his lead, creeping toward a clearing where the next clue Mercer had left behind was supposed to be. The air smelled of wet earth, moss, and tension, each breath Daniel took filled with anticipation. Then, from behind a rusted rail car, a calm, deliberate voice broke the silence. "You took something from me, officer. Now I'm taking it back." Daniel spun, gun drawn, but Mercer stepped into the clearing with a slow, almost casual grace. His eyes were cold, calculating, his grin small but deadly. "The girl was bait," Mercer said softly, savoring the moment. "But you came alone, brave, or stupid." Shadow lunged forward, teeth bared. Mercer dodged effortlessly, disappearing behind another tree, then reappearing as though he had vanished into thin air. Daniel's pulse raced. He realized the full scale of Mercer's plan. Every move they had made, every step in the forest, had been anticipated. This wasn't just a test of speed or skill. It was a battle of wits, nerves, and patience. The girl pressed closer, whispering. He said, "If anyone touches me, if anyone interferes, bad things happen." Daniel's fingers tightened on the strap holding her. The air felt heavy, almost alive, charged with danger. Mercer had engineered every detail to manipulate fear, to control the situation from the shadows. He was a predator, and Daniel was walking into his game. Suddenly, Mercer's voice came again, echoing through the clearing. "One move, officer, and it all ends here. The dog can't protect you forever." Daniel's jaw clenched. He had no choice. Every instinct told him to protect the girl, anticipate Mercer's next move, and trust Shadow. He could feel the dog vibrating with tension, ready to strike at any sign of aggression. Then Mercer stepped forward, slow, deliberate, his hand dipping toward a strap beneath his jacket. Daniel's stomach dropped. A detonator? Explosives. Another trap. The girl screamed from the SUV, parked at the edge of the clearing. Daniel's head snapped toward her. He realized in that instant that Mercer had orchestrated the situation perfectly. The forest, the girl, the dog, the shadows, all designed to test him, provoke him, control him. Daniel forced himself to breathe, to think, to act. Every second counted. One wrong move could be fatal. He glanced at Shadow, eyes meeting the dog's alert gaze. They were a team, and if Mercer wanted a game, Daniel was going to play, but on his terms. Because Mercer wasn't just hunting fear, he was hunting control, and Daniel Reyes would not give it to him. Daniel's heart hammered in his chest as Colt Mercer stepped fully into the clearing, eyes blazing with a cold, measured intensity. The girl's small body trembled in his arms, pressed tight against his chest, every fiber of her being radiating fear. Shadow snarled, low and menacing, tail stiff, muscles coiled like springs, ears pinned forward. Every instinct Daniel had screamed the same thing. This was it, the final confrontation, the point where mistakes would cost lives. Mercer's movements were deliberate, controlled, almost casual, yet every step carried the weight of deadly intent. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that made Daniel's stomach twist. "You've come a long way, officer," Mercer said softly, voice like ice, "but this is where it ends. One wrong move, and everything dies, her, the dog, you, all of it." Daniel swallowed hard, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down like a vice. Every second he hesitated, every blink, could be fatal. He had trained for high-pressure situations, for life-or-death decisions, but nothing could prepare him for a mind like Mercer's, calm, patient, and terrifyingly intelligent. Shadow barked, lunging forward. Mercer dodged with unnerving precision, disappearing behind a tree, then reappearing as if he had melted into the shadows. The girl gasped, tiny fingers clutching Daniel's uniform, whispering, He's fast." Daniel's hand tightened around his holster, eyes never leaving Mercer. "Let her go," he demanded, voice steady despite the tension. "It doesn't have to end like this." Mercer laughed softly, a chilling sound that echoed through the foggy forest. "Oh, officer, this is only the climax. I've been waiting years for this moment. Every move you made, every step you followed, every instinct you trusted, I predicted it all. And now we see if you're worthy." Daniel realized the truth. Mercer hadn't just set a trap for the girl. He had designed an entire psychological battlefield, anticipating Daniel's reactions, using every ounce of fear, courage, and training against him. Then Mercer made his move. His hand dipped beneath his jacket, revealing a small, metallic device, a detonator. Daniel froze. His eyes met the girl's, wide with terror, and he realized just how close Mercer had brought them to the edge. "Stay calm, Shadow," Daniel muttered, voice low. The dog growled, hackles raised, ready to leap at the first sign of aggression. Mercer's grin widened. "One move, officer, one, and it all ends." Daniel's mind raced. He had no room for hesitation. Every second counted. He could feel the tension in the air like a physical force, pressing down, constricting his chest. The fog, the trees, the shadows, everything seemed alive, watching, waiting for him to act. He forced himself to think. Mercer's eyes flicked to Shadow, then to the girl. The man's confidence was absolute. He believed Daniel had only two choices, panic or wait. But Daniel had trained for unpredictability. He had faced danger before, yes, but never someone like this, someone who used fear as a weapon. "Mercer," Daniel barked, voice cutting through the forest. "If you touch her, I swear, I'll end this right now." The threat was deliberate, the pause calculated. Mercer hesitated, eyes narrowing, and for the first time, Daniel saw a flicker of uncertainty. That was all he needed. With lightning speed, Daniel shifted the girl behind his body, sliding a hand toward his belt to secure the radio. Shadow leaped, teeth bared, knocking Mercer off balance. The man stumbled, a flash of fury in his eyes. But Daniel didn't fire. He had another plan. He lunged, grabbing Mercer's wrist just as the detonator clattered to the ground. Shadow pinned Mercer's arm to the dirt with precision. The struggle was brief, but intense, every second feeling like hours. Daniel wrestled Mercer to the ground, keeping the girl out of harm's way. Mercer's grin faltered, the calm mass breaking just slightly under the pressure. Finally, Daniel forced Mercer's arms behind him, snapping handcuffs tight. Shadow barked triumphantly, chest heaving. The girl collapsed against Daniel, sobbing, tiny arms wrapping around his waist. Relief flooded him, but he didn't relax. Not yet. He scanned the misty forest, ensuring no more traps, no hidden dangers, no last-ditch surprises. The fog began to lift as Daniel radioed for backup, keeping the girl safe in his arms. Police units arrived moments later, lights cutting through the trees, flashing red and blue, painting the forest in urgent color. Mercer was secured, his calm, predatory demeanor replaced with restrained fury. The girl looked up at Daniel, voice trembling. You saved me. Daniel smiled, exhausted, heart still pounding. No, Shadow helped, and you were brave too. As Mercer was led away, Daniel noticed something chilling. A folded note in Mercer's pocket. He picked it up, unfolding it carefully. Written in Mercer's precise, obsessive handwriting were two words, "Not finished." Daniel's jaw tightened. He knew this wasn't over. Mercer had been stopped, yes, but the mind behind the chaos, the obsession, the games, was still out there.